Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Lit Happens. Today's focus, we're going to be looking at Othello with none other than my co-host, Adrielle. How are you, Adrielle? How's things in the first week of school holidays?
Oh, it's fantastic, isn't it? When you can wake up and not have to worry about going into work. So
Yeah.
I definitely
Did you
won't
ever
be
have those
correct.
mornings where you're like, oh, and then you're like, oh no, I don't have to be anywhere. It's fine. I'm not
Yeah,
late. It's all good.
honestly, it's great, isn't it? It's
So
funny.
good.
I'm trying to be a lot more in routine and in rhythm
Mm-hmm.
because I find sometimes
Mm-hmm.
if you sleep in till late just because you can, you waste half your day, and then at the end of the holidays, you're like,
So
"Where did my
true.
holidays go?" You spent half
Mm-hmm.
of it sleeping because you're just that exhausted from
Yeah.
the term. But yeah, no,
Uh-huh.
it's been good. It's been good. Had a good Easter break
That's good.
and had a good end to the term, and it was actually nice
Mm.
finishing one day early. To be honest, having Good Friday as a public holiday, uh,
Yeah,
can't complain.
big bonus there. Not at
Yeah,
all. I feel like everyone has been very exhausted in term one.
hundred
Very,
percent.
very tired. I feel like term one used to be like the slightly more relaxed term, but everything just feels full steam ahead now, isn't it?
It's just go, go, go in the teaching world, isn't
Yeah,
it? And with all the change that is abound, it's just an
yeah,
interesting space. I would say an interesting space. So
absolutely.
yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
It's good to have the break. It's good to relax, unwind, and hopefully just recharge the batteries and get ready for term two.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're going to present a nice episode here for us on Othello, which I think is very timely. I know a lot of schools are choosing it now for the new syllabus in Module B. A lot of schools would have taught it in the prelim. Yeah, so I think this is going to be a really nice, popular episode, just something that people can put in their ears and get a bit of a refresher again,
Yeah,
and some different perspectives or things that they don't necessarily focus on but are definitely options. So we're very thankful. We might
yeah.
start then with our elite or quit for today. And this is a very Othello specific one. So this is teaching your class that Iago has no real motive for his evil while he's busy confessing his villainy in every soliloquy. Because I think Iago is a very complicated character because you could argue either way, right?
Yeah. No, yeah, you could argue during the course of the play, but then you just see his final lines of the play, and you just
Yeah,
see
then you're like, ah.
who is this guy's just pure evil. Like he just does things for the
Yeah.
sake of just. It's like lighting a match and watching the whole forest burn in a way. That's
But
literally what.
I think that's a good hook for our students. I think they'd be
Yeah,
fascinated by that, don't you?
yeah,
What do
yeah.
you
It's
what do
like he
you
just.
mean he's just doing this for fun?
That's right. I mean, like it's
Mm.
students listening, and I think teachers can relate to this a little bit. And some of the our older students probably look at it, and you just maybe look at some of the younger generations coming through. It was funny today actually. I met up with a few young men that I had known back when they were young. They're about 25 now or so, just showing our age. And we were just walking to Kmart, and I seen them, and it was sort of like that awkward look, like, is this him? Is this, and we were like, hey. So we caught up, and it was funny. Even these guys who, they're good kids, but could be cheeky, like we sort of say that, and they're
Mhm.
just like, man. The first thing they asked was like, "What's with this next generation coming through?" And it's like that question is just like some kids, like you just see things. I think we were just discussing this before when you've got like the
We
random
were.
kids just yelling in classes for what other
You're like,
reason? Like, what
why? Yeah.
are you doing?
What
Like,
an odd use of your energy. Yeah.
yeah, exactly right. So it's just it's an interesting, but teaching the class whether Iago has no real motive for his evil, I think that's definitely
Mhm.
lit because it's hard
Yeah.
to comprehend. It's really hard to
Yeah.
comprehend, isn't it? Like
Yes. Yeah,
he
it
just
is.
confesses all of these things throughout the entirety, and we build this tension, expecting some sort of cathartic moment towards the end, and then it's just like,
Mhm.
oh, what? This guy's like,
Yeah.
this is all I will say, like, this is, yeah,
Like,
and
what
you're
do you
just left
mean
with
that's all
nothing.
you're gonna say? Look what you've
Yeah,
just done. Yeah.
literally, and then yeah, it's wild. It's an interesting sort of exploration of the human psyche, which I think it
Oh,
works
totally.
itself really well into what we're going to speak about in terms of the critical study and whatnot as we do move forward through the episode today.
And I agree. Like, I think that's lit too, because I think even though in the end he does state why he did it, but there's
Mm,
no real
mm,
sense of, but like you said, what's in your soul or your heart or your psychology?
yeah,
Like, where is the line? Like,
yeah,
there, like at what point do you feel like, oh, I've gotten revenge now? And I think
Yeah,
that's why students either really love or hate Iago,
yeah,
because I know a lot of students who I've taught, they're like, Iago's my favorite character, and I can see why, because
mm,
he's so like unfettered in what he does that it's fascinating. Because
yeah,
where do we see that often characters who do whatever they want whenever they
yeah,
want with no remorse?
yeah,
And I definitely think this is lit and a great hook for you students, because they might actually come to that decision of like, well, they know why he, what he was upset about and what he was trying to get at, but the
mm,
sheer malice of it seems to have no real reason or motive. And I think
yeah,
that's, and I feel like this is why Othello is so popular, right? I don't feel like I've ever had a class that have disliked Othello. Have you?
yeah, yeah. No, definitely not. Like I've loved it, even when we were in high school. I mean, we've been learning it for
Yes,
quite a long time,
agree.
so it's been fantastic. But like, I mean, just the power of those lines. What is it? Demand me nothing. What you know, you know. From this time forth, I will never speak a word. Like this is literally right after he's killed his wife Amelia. It's sort of
Yeah.
that final act of defiance and control.
Yes.
I mean, some of the research and
Yes.
some of the readings that you guys will definitely come over in your time exploring the text, you'll probably see it's his control over the narrative, which he controls.
Mm,
Technically the whole time. So it's that final act of defiance that we see, and it denies Othello and others maybe that justification for their actions. Othello and
yeah.
Desdemona and and the rest. Like it's just a wild character. He's such a complex character, and I think, like we say,
Yeah.
doing the psychoanalysis of him, even in your critical study, would be a great way into the text. Especially, like why do we do things in this day and age the way we do things? Why do
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
I find like Iago's character is definitely fitting of the major trend and shift towards people liking those true crime documentaries. Like people get so
Very true.
hooked
Mm-hmm.
up on like the whys. Like I know I was just going through that
Mm-hmm.
phase for a little while, or listening to the true crime podcast. Like, why do people do these things?
Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah. It's
Iago's
like a
could be,
fascination of what,
yeah,
how are they built that way? Like, you don't condone it,
exactly,
but you're just like, what goes on in there
yeah.
that comes out in this way? Yeah,
Exactly,
true.
exactly. But yeah,
Mm.
anyway, that's lit.
I think that is lit, because that's a really nice kind of contemporary connection. And like,
Yeah,
even when you think of like characters in big TV shows, like in your Breaking Bad and House of Cards and things like that, that have that Machiavellian streak to them,
yeah,
there's a lot that can be connected for students, I think, if they're
yeah,
struggling to connect. But I feel like Othello's often a winner in English classes. So that
yeah.
brings me then to the first question. If we can start breaking down with you a little bit, Adriel, some different approaches to looking at the context of Othello within the actual Module B rubric.
Yeah, yeah. So as we sort of looked at last week, um, the module B, like teachers need to understand the module B rubric first and foremost.
Yeah.
And I guess the key moments, the key parts of the text is we're looking at, the evaluation, it's a sophisticated evaluation of form, features, contexts, and how they shape meaning, meaning and textual integrity. And if you haven't heard this sort of breakdown, I encourage you guys to go back and listen to the artist episode where I do unpack this with a little bit more vigor, but I think it's important for us to really, really understand, that Mod B unit. Othello, wow, what a complex text. And by looking at each of those different layers, it's no longer a novel, it's a play, first and foremost. I think that's quite important for us, for our teachers, our students to understand. So obviously that's going to be a little bit of a difference. But again, it comes into what's the word? How should I put it? Like, your kids will often ask, like, why do I have to learn Shakespeare? And we look at that textual integrity of all of Shakespeare's plays and why they remain relevant to this day. We just mentioned this at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning of the episode. We studied Othello back when we were in high school, and
Yes.
that was a few years
Yes.
ago now. And
Mm-hmm.
it continues to remain relevant now as well. And it's like
Yeah.
when we're doing a critical study, we're sort of unpacking the whys. It becomes that sophisticated evaluation. How does form work? How do the features of that Shakespearean text work? How and why do the context shape the meaning that we come to sort of have today? Especially regarding complex characters such as Iago, for example. Yeah, so I mean, you can have many ways into the text. One of the central propositions that a lot of teachers look to sort of dive into the text might be to do with jealousy, or that green-eyed monster that we sort of come across in the play itself.
Mm-hmm.
One of those guiding questions that you might start off with might be something along the lines of, to what extent does Shakespeare explore the destructive impact of jealousy, and maybe even prejudice on human relationships? So you're sort of making that relevance and that connection to the students. It's a way in. It's the
Mm-hmm.
hook
Mm-hmm.
to engage
Mm-hmm.
with. And I think like just having those really humanistic sort of ideas can really get your kids on board, especially for a critical study, because it's not just we're just learning this for the sake of we have to do this. That's one part of it, but you want to make them understand the relevance. And I think making those humanistic sort of connections is very, very important. But yeah, if we go through Othello, just a bit of context here. Written around 1603 to 1604 in Jacobean England. This was a time of intense, what we say, cultural anxiety. England becoming more aware of the wider world through the trade routes, now becoming more and more relevant. There's an exploration and conflict with the Ottoman Empire occurring, as we sort of see with Othello's role as a military man in the play. And as Shakespeare's work sort of continues going, we see that the play is set in two distinct locations. Right? So you've got the ordered cosmopolitan city of Venice, and then you've got the chaotic frontier island of Cyprus. So we see like setting become quite significant here, so that
Mm-hmm.
geographical mirrors the placed their central tensions.
Yeah.
At the heart of the context is probably this shifting paradigm of difference in early modern Europe. So you've got the medieval Europe, which had defined the other primarily through religion. So you've got the premise of this play, Christians versus the Muslims or infidels. I think that's probably one of those premises, because Othello, again, it's where he's related, or he's spoken to about or identified as the Moor, and there's a lot of conjecture as to where Othello actually came from. Was he part of the northern African sort of countries, which we'll see have a primarily distinct group of individuals and traits linked to that area, or did he come from a bit further south, more into like central
Mm-hmm.
Africa? So that there is much conjecture, and I highly recommend you guys do the research on both of these contexts, because there's
Mm-hmm.
valid streams. And then the more and the terms. I mean, if you even go into the Merchant of Venice, you'll have references of the Prince of Morocco, again, Northern Africa, and you can make the links to Othello here. So yeah, by Shakespeare's time, a modern racial ideology was emerging during this time, where we can see like the physical appearance, skin color, and ethnic origin becomes like key different markers of difference. So Othello, the Moorish general, as I've sort of referred to here, stands at the crossroads of these two paradigms. He's a highly respected military leader who has served Venice loyally, yet he is constantly reminded of his outsider status. And we see that tension. We see a lot of
Mm.
this happening with the racial slurs, the stereotypes, etc., etc. So what we see is Iago then manipulates and exploits these very anxieties, these tensions, and his language repeatedly reduces Othello to his race. And we're going to see the repetition of the
Mm.
Moor, the animalistic imagery of like the black ram, the Barbary horse,
Yeah.
which taps into that Jacobean fear um,
Mm-hmm.
about like miscegenation. So this idea of foreignness, and the supposed sexual threat of the other. I mean, it's something that you can speak about in the current world and the current sort of
Yes.
geopolitical issues that are occurring. So you can really make those relevant links and make it relevant
Mm-hmm.
to students in an advanced class, I would say, as to think about this, but be respectful in your discourse. I think that's probably one of those important times. Um, but yeah, amongst this, we also see at the same time the play challenges these prejudices as well. Right? So Othello's noble service is and dignified speech initially contradict the racist assumptions of that Venetian society. So the context is crucial for our students in particular, because it shows that Othello's tragedy is not simply the result of personal jealousy or maybe even like that supernatural flaw during this time. It's actually driven by powerful social forces.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
you know, and that's that connection that you can make to our modern day ideas of racism and the construct which it is. But yeah, so the play the play definitely looks at racial prejudice, gender expectations. Obviously, through Iago's character, the idea of deception or the destructive power of deception that operates both inside and outside of the individual. So there's just some, I guess, a few context points that we can sort of get started with. But there is so
Yeah.
much out there, and this is probably a reason why teachers will be using this text for Module B. You've already got like an abundance of resources. I'm just sort of tapping the surface here, or just breaking the surface a little bit, hopefully refreshing your mind
Definitely.
with a few of those areas which you can definitely look into. Yeah.
No, definitely. I think you made a really good point at emphasizing for Module B the relationship in the rubric between context, shaping those main ideas, and then resulting in that relevance of those values, the merit, because we're always talking about what gives the text integrity. And I think you make a really great point about, even if you're in your examples here for Othello, how those social and historical contextual forces are then shaping those issues that are playing out, that are also highly relevant for a modern audience, that have that universal quality to them. So I think that's really helpful. Thank you, Adriel. Might move on then to the next question.
Yep.
So then we've done the context. We might look at then how can we explore or unpack some of these key ideas to look at the values and the issues that are being explored through Othello?
Yeah. I'm just going to list like 4 key areas that I've just listed down here. So you've got jealousy and, the psychological transformation that we see in the play, which is quite an obvious one. It's synonymous with some of the most famous lines that we all know in the play. And I'll come back to that. Number 2, you've got race and the construction of this idea of the other. Number 3, manipulation and deception. And D is probably the easiest one, and it's probably a nice way into the text, but it's the idea of appearance versus reality. And we sort of looked at this with our little quick question. Now, just a reminder, I know I'm speaking a little bit about Othello's character, but the unit requires you guys to look at the way Shakespeare constructs the text. That's so significant. So always think about like the purpose, that authorial didactic purpose of each text that you're looking at in Module
Good point.
B. So very, very important to sort of note that for our teachers, for our students. That's what makes your work stand out. Rather than just it becoming a summary of what happens in the play, you're looking at the construction of the text, which leads to its textual integrity. And then that's very, very important just to note there. But if I look to unpack each of these areas just quickly, jealousy and psychological transformation. We see, in the play, Othello begins as this confident, noble general whose language is elevated, it's esteemed, it's poetic, it's very controlled. And then we see Iago, or Iago. How do you pronounce it? I've always had like different pronunciations.
I tend to say Iago, but I don't feel like that there's a preference personally. Like either or for me is fine.
Exactly. Anyway, just write it you're writing this down, students, in your essays. IAGO, okay?
That's it. And then you're covered. It doesn't matter how you say it.
Exactly. But we see him plant the seeds about Desdemona's fidelity. And Othello's speech gradually then becomes more fragmented and turns into these jealous rants of self-doubt. And we even see that physical collapse, like to the point where he faints, throughout the play. So this transformation, it's not sudden, but it's a gradual degradation of his character. This once noble, esteemed character is whittled down. And this sort of will allow people, like teachers, if you're teaching this, and even students, it'll allow you to trace how jealousy erodes his sense of self and honor throughout the play. We understand with this sort of area, the handkerchief becomes the catalyst. It turns suspicion into certainty, but we know it's all planted. Othello obviously doesn't. We see Iago's deception coming into play here, but it demonstrates how a single object can trigger this psychological destruction. And again, you can make the links to the real world. You might find like in a study somewhere which shows the way someone might have gone through this sort of degradation. With this area, you can see students can evaluate how Shakespeare uses Othello's changing language to show the destructive power of unchecked emotion. That's definitely an area which you can definitely look at. For part B here, the race and the construction of the other. I like this because from the very first scene, we see Iago and Roderigo reduce Othello to his race. When they start to refer to him as the Moor and those other terms that he has there. I think it just reveals that deeper Venetian prejudice, innate sort of within that Venetian society. Yet Othello's military service and Desdemona's love initially challenge these stereotypes. There's all these challenges that we sort of see creating this dramatic tension. So again, for students, if you're looking at this area here, you can sort of evaluate how Shakespeare both reflects and interrogates those Jacobean racial anxieties, making race that central social force in Othello's tragedy. But I think one of the big things here is that the play shows that racial prejudice is not just background color, but an active force that Iago exploits to destroy that hero or that tragic hero that we come to know as Othello. He becomes that tragic hero because of that exploitation. So again, another area. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think that what's really important about what you're highlighting is how you're connecting it to those features of tragedy or those tropes. So like you've got your idea and what's represented, but it's like you said at the start of this question, it's about how Shakespeare is presenting this. And so by connecting those ideas to those tropes, you're getting that element of construction, which is very important in the Module B rubric. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
very
what
much
was
so.
sorry, go on.
No, you're right. You're right. So I think the third area was manipulation and deception. And this here is where we see Iago as being the master manipulator, which we can all see. The audience sees it as well, So he uses actually the soliloquies really cleverly here. So Shakespeare's soliloquies that, he uses Iago sort of performs here, reveal his motives of envy and resentment while pretending to be, quote, honest Iago, to everyone else within the play. And again, we see that symbol, or that symbolic handkerchief, which was originally a very sentimental token of love. I would encourage you guys to do some research on the handkerchief because it's quite significant. I was like, what do you mean the handkerchief? But it has the very sentimental value to it. And Othello sort of speaks of this, the way that they've constructed the text. But this, turns into this idea of it's false proof of infidelity. So again, if I'm a student here, if I'm a teacher, I'm encouraging my students to analyze how Iago's careful staging of scenes and the use of half-truths allows him to control the narrative which is occurring. And what this highlights is it's how deception operates as a powerful dramatic force, showing that evil in the play is not just this supernatural idea, but it's a deeply human and calculated sort of reality that we see is constructed by Iago. So it's funny because, again, if you've done your work on historical context and you understand the great chain of being and you look at, this 1600s period, a lot of people during this time and even the Elizabethan England will attribute a lot of this stuff to, the chain of being, like this is what God intends. However, we see the way that Iago really challenges that construct here as well. So there's a lot to explore with that idea, and it sort of leads us into this idea of appearance versus reality as well. Because we see that the play is built on dramatic irony, and we see that the audience knows Iago's true nature through his asides, while the characters on stage believe that he is, as we all come to know him as, honest Iago, in the play. So this gap between what is seen and what is real is central to the tragedy that is Othello. So here we have, for instance, animal imagery and the contrast between the public honor and the private suspicion, which further reinforces this theme here. So again, if I'm a student here, I'm looking to evaluate how Shakespeare uses these techniques to make the audience complicit in the tragedy and forcing us to watch Othello's downfall while knowing the truth he cannot see. Like that becomes quite tough, doesn't it? But yeah, there's just a few key areas. Again, there's many more, but there's a few sort of ways into the text there.
No, I think those are really good because those are also, underpinned by literary theories that could be used alongside. Like I always enjoy that feminist perspective. And, you talked about the importance of the handkerchief. And even if you're looking at from a gender perspective, what that represents, and, the way that you could look at that psychoanalytic theory when you're looking at, the inner workings and the Machiavellian approach and the colonizer and the colonizee. So I think those ideas that you've chosen, Adriel, are really powerful because they lend themselves very nicely to other perspectives and readings that students could undertake or that you could guide. Because ultimately, we do need to encourage those readings in Module B. Like, usually we want to throw in a critic perspective that supports our own, but it's good that what you've picked has so much scope in the play, but so much scope within the context and within literary criticism as well. So that's awesome. Thank you so much. Well, then we've gone through those areas. How do we move on then in terms of how do we translate that to the skills that students will need to be able to engage with these ideas and engage with this text in the module?
Yeah. So remember, in order to get those higher band 5s and 6s, your students need to, I guess, go beyond that basic plot, which is what a lot of people will do. They'll retell the plot, they'll summarize it. So we need to move into that sophisticated critical analysis. Again, a bit of a plug, if you want to know critical analysis, go back to one of our older episodes and have a look at what we've sort of spoken about in quite a bit of depth here. But I think the first thing that we want to encourage our students to do is, they need to have, especially in advanced, is independent research. This is essential, right? So they should be spending their time looking at things like the Jacobean views on race, the historical relationship between Venice and the Ottoman Empire. Look at maybe some of the critical debates about Iago's psychology, that psychological sort of state, particularly whether he is, motiveless, or is he driven by envy and resentment? Like, these are questions that, or this research will allow you guys to garner some fresh perspectives. This is both for teachers and students. In particular, I would say for teachers as well, you've got to be putting in that little bit of extra reading and critical sort of analysis there. And then we've got to translate that into those, constructing them into complex arguments and having that sort of personal voice. So this is where that independent research comes into play, doesn't it? It's not just the teacher's voice. It's, what is your authentic personal voice? So our students need to learn to sustain that nuanced, I guess, to what extent position, using evaluative language to weigh up the relative importance of any of the themes that they have covered throughout the play. So if I'm a teacher here, I'm going to encourage my students to develop their own voice by asking questions like, those to what extent questions. So for example, if I ask to what extent is Othello a victim of Iago's manipulation? And to what extent is he a victim of his own insecurities and the society around him? Like that, you could really spend a whole lesson just discussing a question like that. And do fun things like, get them to come up, write on the whiteboard, or little think, pair, share activities, which I think definitely gets the students, involved. But the last thing is making sure you know your text as well. It sounds simple, but in a critical study, you need to know the text like the back of your hand. I think that's very, very significant. How and why the techniques, the structure, the language that is used shape meaning throughout the play. For example, the function of soliloquies. You can look at the way that the handkerchief or the motifs within the play function to represent certain themes or ideas or concepts. And I guess every technique, it must be linked back to the central concerns, whichever ones that you decide to state in your own analysis. And then just being generally, I think just being curious, be intrigued, go in and have that curiosity about the play. Like, but why? Why does this happen? What was the reason for Othello, being developed or characterized the way that he was by Shakespeare? Why didn't he use maybe a European character in the place of Othello? Why? Like these are the questions
why
that
that
you can
choice?
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And you just want to cultivate that mindset, in amongst your students, because when you have that critical sort of mindset cultivated, that's where you get that authentic sort of personal voice, rather than just asking. I mean, we've discussed this at length with a few of the students we've taught. They seem to just want to ask the teacher, what do you think? Give me the answer.
Yeah.
No, like, give me the
It's
word
not
for word
about
answer.
that, is it?
No,
Yeah,
exactly right. We're not really doing your critical thinking any good if we were to just say, "Here, this is what you're right." So
yeah.
we're prepping our students, especially when it comes to arts. And let's be honest, like in advanced English, a lot of them are going to go into university where they will have to think freely and critically. And then I hope that when we establish these skills with the students, it will definitely help. Yeah.
No, I think that those are really good strategies because they're really effective ways for students to just move beyond the storyline and move into like the didactic intent and the messaging. And you've given a lot of great suggestions there for sure.
Yeah.
So I might move then on to asking you, once students start getting into their curiosity and their approaches and interpretations, what are some literary and stylistic techniques that are really powerful for students to have that good understanding of before they actually start diving deep into the
Mm,
specifics
mm.
of the play for their own approaches.
Yeah. So I'm gonna just put it out there, and I have plugged them. We're not sponsored by any of these websites that I'm going to be sort of referencing here,
Mhm.
but you type it in on Google. It's a powerful tool still.
Yeah.
Techniques that are relevant to Shakespeare's plays. You've got wonderful
Mhm.
websites that will help you, and I'll
Yes.
just mention a few. So things like dramatic irony for us, the use of soliloquies, imagery, motifs. I think foreshadowing is very, very important in Othello. Um,
Yeah.
the juxtaposition, not just of images, but also the language that is being used. Um,
Yeah.
you've got character foils and symbolic settings as well.
Yeah.
So I've mentioned about 6 to 7 areas here. I did not do that intentionally either with those two numbers. It's funny, isn't it? With those two numbers, I apologize
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
trauma that I've just caused myself. You can
Yeah.
see I'm traumatized,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah.
legitimately.
I said that like 2 weeks ago, within context,
Yeah,
unintentionally. I was like 5, 6, 7, and this kid
yeah,
just took a sharp breath, was like, and then he goes,
yeah.
I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna
Oh,
do it. And I said, I appreciate that. Thank you.
yeah.
He's
It's
like,
so
I'm not
annoying that
taking the bait. It's so annoying.
it's
Oh,
it's so annoying that I'm aware of it now as well, and I'm
yes,
just genuinely just
yes,
mentioning something here, and it's like, why do I have to clarify
yes.
this? Anyway,
Oh,
let's go,
agree.
let's go back into this, explore these a little bit more. But if you're looking at dramatic irony, obviously you're going to be looking at things like Iago's asides, which reveal his plans while Othello remains unaware. And we'll look at
Yeah.
how it positions the audience as those observers to the events. The
Mhm.
soliloquies, again, both Othello and Iago use these soliloquies, but if we focus on Iago here, we see his direct address to the audience, which exposes his inner motivations and manipulation, and this creates that sort of chilling, on edge tension or that intimacy with this foil or antagonist character that we have developed through Iago. If you're looking at imagery and motifs, there's so much in this play. I've kept referring to the handkerchief as a central symbol, which represents
Mhm.
trust and betrayal. But you can look at things like the animal imagery that refers to Othello,
Mhm.
the racial
Mhm.
stereotypes that comes with
Mhm.
that
There's a lot.
animalistic
Yeah.
imagery. Yep.
Yeah.
The idea of jealousy as a poison as well, that
Mhm.
metaphorical poison
Mhm.
that we can sort of see. Um, I like this idea of foreshadowing. Like Shakespeare uses the storms or those tempests quite regularly. It's not obviously he writes
Very
a whole
well.
play called The
Yeah.
Tempest, but we can see the tempest on the horizon, through their travels through Cyprus. And again, that symbolic
Mhm.
settings, which we've sort of mentioned here, comes into play as well. But the foreshadowing of the storm, the handkerchief dropping, Iago's early hints, which we sort of see through the language that he uses and his soliloquies and asides. But what this does is it all builds to that inevitable tragedy that we have in the
Yeah.
end. Um, I mentioned the juxtaposition of language register as well here. So Othello's elevated blank verse versus
Mhm.
Iago's colloquial prose, which highlights status and deception.
Mhm.
And then again, you've got some of those character for symbolic sort of settings as well. The contrast between the ordered Venice and the chaotic Cyprus on the outskirts of the city. Always bring up a map of this region as well, just to show um, the chaos and link it back to the context in Shakespeare's time. You remember we said that there was a threat of the Ottomans as well at this time for Venetian society here. So, you can make the link there as well. But yeah, those are a few key ideas um, that our teachers and students alike can go into. But there's so much out there. There's an
Yeah.
abundance of resources that really, really explore, some of these
Yeah.
techniques.
No, that's a really strong list. And it's always important for, like you said, to have this overall understanding of how these techniques are functioning. And then the specific examples will be dependent on the approach that the student picks and the
Yeah.
ideas that they're addressing. But that's a fabulous list. Thank you. Well, then I might ask lastly, like once we've kind of gone through all that deep analysis and we're trying to get our kids now into the response, how do we translate these explored ideas into a persuasive essay and hopefully one that is of that band 5-6 quality, because that's what we would be pushing advanced students towards as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the biggest piece of advice I'm going to give here is you need your students to get away from maybe just focusing on the characters of Othello and Iago. Look at the play holistically. Look at the way
And
Shakespeare
other
constructs the
characters.
play.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yep.
Like, look at the way Shakespeare constructs it. Move beyond the
Mm-hmm.
text. You're like that God eye. And you're looking at
Mm-hmm.
critical ways. So again, engage with critical readings. There's so much out there in terms of Google Scholar, academic journals, whatever you might find online. Like, familiarize yourself with the way academics have written about the play. Look at the language, look at the way it flows. That will definitely help you when it comes to your essay writing, in particular. I think that's quite significant. When you're looking at some of the specifics to do with essay writing, you need your work to move from, I guess, retell and summary or plot summary to analysis and evaluation. So a lot of what I've been speaking about today has centered around that evaluative language. Like I said, to what extent? To what extent? To what extent? It's like you're always questioning. You're questioning. And by doing so throughout the course of your study, whether you're a student engaging in the text right now, like you're always asking questions. I think that's significant. Familiarize yourself with different types of HSC style questions that you can then
Yeah.
explore responses to. But again, we've sort of spoken about this. No matter how you sort of do your basic structure, I generally like to follow the introduction, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. Making sure your thesis statement is very, very clear and really links to the question that is being asked. You've provided a little bit of context in your intro, and then your sub ideas or your sub thesis, mini thesis points, which will frame your topic sentences. Making sure that each of your body paragraphs, is framed by a topic sentence, again, which has already been intro. So everything's linked. I think the cohesiveness of your essay is very, very significant here. That's what I look at when I look at an essay. And then the third thing is, it's that personal informed voice, not just I think that this is blah, 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 but you're looking at critical perspectives. Shakespeare deliberately uses X, Y, and Z techniques, soliloquies, let's say, for example, to highlight how dramatic irony creates tension amongst the audiences, whether reading later on or whether within that context of Elizabethan England. Like, how does that function in those different contexts? And you really can sort of really explore that. And I think that endears your marker to saying, well, this kid actually understands what they've studied. It gives them an understanding of, they just don't know how to, they're moving beyond just a summary of Othello. He gets jealous and then he gets manipulated by Iago, who's just pure evil, and he kills his wife and then finds out that it's all wrong and then can't live with the guilt anymore and kills himself at the end. Like, it's just, and then Iago
Spoiler alert.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, you should know this because it is a tragedy.
Oh, yes. Everybody
Let's be
dies.
honest.
Yeah.
Everybody dies in the end. But yeah, and then you jump into your, like I said, making sure you're looking at the construction of the text, what merits its textual integrity, and how it resonates with the ideas that maybe Shakespeare is trying to convey to his audiences. So that's where you need to do that critical sort of reading and really know the text like the back of your hand. So yeah, I think those are a few things. And then just practice and more practice. The more you practice and expose yourself to different questions and practice under time conditions, the better that you're going to get as a student. And as a teacher, I highly encourage you. Google Timer is fantastic. Put it up on the board. Give them 20-minute writing activities. Build them up to that 40-minute essay. Because if they're not practicing that enough, they could write the best essay in an hour, but what good is that when they've got 40 minutes in the exam situation?
Very good point.
Yeah.
Those are some fabulous strategies. So helping these students look at what their point of view perspective thesis is, looking at their strategies for the timed essays. I think, like you said, that's so incredibly important, but they're not going to get to the confidence of doing that until they've got their analysis fine-tuned as to, like you said, what is the function of that? What is the point of that? What is the impact of audience? So I think you've given some fabulous ideas for students and teachers alike listening that looks at how do we actually translate our learning of Othello into a quality response. So I think that was really valuable. I know listeners are going to love this episode. Any kind of final thoughts or points, Adriel, before we wrap up this episode for today?
Get the kids to read it out loud when you're going through the play. I love
It's
that with all the Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Oh, it's fun. They all get engaged. They have a bit of a laugh. They enjoy the little digs that the Venetians are having at Othello's expense with the references to the tupping that is occurring. So like it's good fun. It's good fun where you can just sort of go in with your kids.
It's fun because you see them like really emotionally get invested, don't they? I feel like they really do with Othello. Which obviously works really beautifully for the catharsis that occurs at the end. But I think that's a wonderful tip. If you take anything away from today, guys, it's, read it out loud with your group. If they're performers, sure, get them up. If not, even just the verbal reading of it is so impactful. So that's awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Adriel, and thank you to all our listeners. So as always, you can follow us on our socials. We also have our episodes up on YouTube for anybody who prefers to watch along. And just, thank you for engaging. Thank you for listening, and contact us anytime. And we look forward to being back in your ears next week with a brand new episode.